Hello, everyone, and welcome to our AMA on navigating the challenges of building an open source metaverse. Today, we have our senior Unity developer and metaverse expert, Adrian Pariente. Adrian has worked extensively on game development and has been an integral part of projects like Decentraland and now our very own Unyted. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you very much.
So maybe before we start, you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and your experience, just like in a couple of sentences.
Yeah, I has been in the game industry for 10 years right now, and the last couple of years it has been more oriented to the metaverse, building the future and trying to stay at the foremost, more important, what I think is going to be the most important thing in the following years.
Great, thank you very much for that. So today we're going to dive deep into the world of metaverse platforms, open source development, some technical challenges, and so much more. We received quite a few questions, so let's start. Let's kick things off with the first one, which is, as a Unity developer who has worked on both game development and metaverse platforms, what are the unique challenges you faced while building metaverse platforms compared to traditional game development?
Yeah, so it's kind of different. How do you make video games and how do you make the metaverse? Because when you are making video games, you usually have some kind of references about how many people are going to play the game at the same time. While when you are you try to make everything in a way that is performant enough to work. But when you are making the metaverse, you don't have control on the content that the people are making. And you need to take into account that probably there is infinite amount of people that is coming to the metaverse, right? So you need to think and develop the platform in a way that it can scale with infinite amount of people, and that is a very technical, very difficult technical problem that you need to overcome. And also you need to think that the people is going to upload their own content, and that is something that you need to take care because you cannot control everything, right? So that will be the two major points that differentiate game development, where in game development you usually have all the control, and in the metaverse you need to kind of give the basic structure for everyone to create their own world.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I mean, it sounds a lot more challenging. Okay, thank you. Now let's go to the second question, which is how does open source development play a role in creating a metaverse, and what advantages does it bring to the table?
Yeah, for the metaverse is kind of the second internet, right? So when you are talking about the internet, you can clearly see that when the internet is open and free for everyone, it's the major thing because anybody can contribute and anybody can make their own part of the internet. So that's when you make something that is open source or is something that is open to everybody, that's something that you can expect to grow and really make a difference, right?
Right.
When something like the internet, or in this case the metaverse, is owned by only one company or a few companies, the innovation that you got through it is less diverse, and of course has less impact on the world. So basically what you want to create is something that anybody can contribute and anybody can try to put their own work on, so it's easier to share and it's easier to create a big impact. So in order to have this, what we do is create it is an open source, because an open source is like a project that anybody can contribute and can create, can help to make their world as they want. So open source has clearly be a way to make this in a very good way. There is a lot of project that has been open source, like for example, Android. Android is a very famous open source project that has been really worked, and I think that is very, very interesting and is the future clearly when everybody can go for it.
That's an excellent point. So you've mentioned scalability, and our next question happens to be exactly on that topic. So in terms of scalability, what are some strategies you've employed to handle a large number of concurrent users in the metaverse?
Yeah, it's very difficult to scale infinite amount of users. So there is different techniques that you need to take into account in order to make a metaverse a lot with. So you make the metaverse in a way that anybody can enter, and there is no any technical difficulties because of it. So basically, there are different techniques that you can use. One of them is like trying to separate all the people into different realms or different dimensions. So when there is a server that is going to be full, what you create is another one that start to allow people, and you balance the people between those two servers. So this way you can escalate horizontally infinity. So basically you want to have as much person as you want into one dimension, and when this dimension is full, you create another one and try to balance the chart between the two. So that will mean that, for example, there is 100 person in one room and another 100 person in another room, so they cannot see each other. So that will be a way to escalate horizontally. And then what you always want to do is try to optimize avatars as much as possible. So there is different ways to do that. Like for example, when an avatar is stand by, you create a snapshot of their image. So basically, instead of rendering the whole avatar, you are rendering only the 2D version of it. So that's where you improve vastly the way the rendering performance that you have. Another way to increase that is what we call occlusion of the avatar. So basically, if an avatar is not active or is not so in your screen, we basically forget it until you is active, kind in a way is active in your own screen, in order to render it and start reacting to its changes, etc.
That's quite interesting.
So that will be, I will say that will be most of the technical uh, things that you do in order to accommodate more people.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So our next question is quite a hot topic when it comes to the digital space. Um, so, privacy and data security are paramount in any online ecosystem. How do you address these concerns while maintaining an open source approach?
Yeah, so the data privacy is something that has been increasing in the people is worrying about the data privacy, right? Especially in the last few years, because we all know that the importance of the data and how it is used by big companies to create some habit for you. So
True.
basically, there is a lot of different ways to tackle this problem. Especially with the open source, I think that's the best way to do it, because you are very open about how do you treat data and which data are you taking into account. There is one big difference, because one is the open source thing, so it's the open source project where you create, and another thing is where do you run this open source project, right? So basically, you give the structure to anybody that can create their own world, so they are in control of their own data. And basically what you can do is, when you are running this world, you can decide which data is stored and where. Of course, you need to take into account that you are GDPR compliant, because in Europe that's something that is very important, and that's something that we take very seriously.
Definitely.
And that's something that, after you have resolved the problems and the challenges that you have, while storing the data in our databases, basically we have created a structure that is very easy to us to delete the user data and select which data do we want to save from the user.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right, now let's talk technical. What would you say are the primary technical limitations you've encountered while building a metaverse, and how have you overcome them?
Okay, so the main problem that you will find for all the metaverse is that currently you need to you need to run them in web browser, because web browser is the easiest way to access for people, right? So you don't need to download things. It's the fastest way, and it's the people are used to navigate through the web. And it should be the same for the metaverse, right? But basically, when you are building for the web browser, you are very limited regarding the resources that you can use from the computer. So you need to take a lot of care about the memory, about the rendering process, and about everything, because it's not something that you have full access to the computer power. So you need to be very careful about what do you put into the metaverse and how do you render the metaverse. You need to apply a lot of techniques in order to save resources from the computer, and also you need to take care about that. Mostly all the people can enter the metaverse, even if the PC is a low end PC, so it's not a so it's a cheap PC, and he still need to, or she still need to enter into the metaverse, right? So basically, you need to build everything very performance wise, so anybody can enter the space, and also is from the technical perspective, it's very difficult because you don't have full access to the sources of the power. So that will be the main problem that you will find when developing a metaverse, because you need the faster entry of the web browser, but you are limited by the resources. You are very constrained.
I see. Okay, so our next question is maybe a little bit more broad. What role do blockchain and NFTs play in the development of the metaverse, and how are they integrated into your projects? Well, you worked on several,
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, so basically when you are making, it's like the internet, right? When we decentralize the internet, it will everything blow up, and everything, and everybody is able to have a little part of the internet on their own, right? So the blockchain technology is something that was built just for that, for the decentralization of the platform. So now there is no one entity that contain all the information, and let's say the magic switch off that can switch and completely make everything disappear. So in that regard, blockchain is something that decentralizes the metaverse into so basically anybody can have their own part, and it doesn't matter because there is no one single entity that is owner of the metaverse, right? So in that regard, the blockchain technology allows to the metaverse to be able to be completely decentralized and completely owned by their user instead of the company that is behind it. And for that, there is also the NFTs are making a big role, because it's an ownership title that enables you to have it inside of the decentralization. There is some mechanism that lets you to decide if you want to buy virtual land or if you want to buy this cloth or whatever. So in this way, you can make a real economic inside the metaverse, where people can trade and can buy and sell and make a life inside the metaverse, where they can just creating content, right? So in that regard, the NFTs are very important, because it's like a ownership trace for that.
Very valuable insights, Adrian. Okay, so I think the next question is from an aspiring maybe Unity developer, or someone looking for guidance from more experienced developers like yourself. So the question is, what advice do you have for those interested in building metaverse platforms and contributing to open source projects?
Yeah, so there is a different position. Yeah, there are different positions that where you can start and build the metaverse. So it all depends on where do you want to be. It's not the same to be on the front end part, on the back end part, on the rendering part. So my recommendation will be to start small, try to understand what do you want to be, where do you want to work. So basically, it's not the same if you like to be on the rendering part or if you want to be on the back end part. So after you have decided, so basically understand your desires and where do you want to be, that will be my first advice. Then after you have decided where do you want to be, start small and go big step by step. Make a small project just so you understand where are you working, right? So if, for example, if you are making rendering the Unity, you can use Unity to create a small game or a small 3D world where you can start learning the basics on your own. And then after you have a kind of a solid experience, you can start contributing to open source project. Because when you start contributing to open source project, you are entering in a project that is like from the business perspective, is a complete product. It's something that is working. It's something where you can understand the architecture. You can start seeing what are the pros and the cons of the architecture. So you start to learn more and more. There is a lot of open project that open source project that hire that when they want to hire engineers, they look at their contributor because they already know the project. So it's a good way to. It's not also a good way to learn about the open source project, but it's also a good way to enter a company because if they want to hire the people that already know the project, right? So that will be a good way. And then there is also you need to so this is a way to enter in the open source, but in the end, it's like you need to get experience step by step and find a project that where you find yourself aligned with, because that's something important as well. So it's something that it takes time. The perseverance is something that is very important because sometimes it will be, it's not easy, but when you persevere and you keep going, in the end, you will find a job in the industry. So that will be the main advice. Keep persevering.
Thank you. Those were some wise words. Okay, so we received a curious question from our community. Why Unity and not Unreal Engine for metaverse development?
Yeah, so there are the two main engines in the industry, and both of them are very good. But I will say that they comply different purposes. So in the case of
we're having some
so in the
difficulties.
Yeah. Technical difficulties.
Sorry,
So
guys.
no problem. No problem. So basically, when you are working with Unity, you are trying to reach multi-platform, right? It's very easy to create a project that is able for different platform. So it's very easy to switch, for example, between WebGL, VR, or mobile if you want. So it's a very versatile engine that is more oriented to create performance projects, but it's very easy to switch between the different hardware. On the other hand, Unreal Engine is more oriented to create where graphics are more important. You can create the same graphic with Unity as well, but the problem is that it's more difficult because you need to invest more time in order to obtain the same result. So Unreal has better graphics out of the box, but it's more difficult to create something that is compatible across different platforms. And then since we are doing the VR things, most of the VR things are made from Unity because it's kind of the standard. So it's an easy way. That's probably the main point, to use Unity over Unreal Engine.
Thank you for clarifying that, Adrian. And finally, before we wrap up, our last question is, how important is an open and interoperable metaverse platform to you personally? How important do you think?
Can you repeat, please?
Sure. So the question is, how important is an open or interoperable metaverse platform?
Yeah, I think that is kind of important to have interoperability, and it's something that is still in the early steps, but in the end is going to happen. But it's going to happen later because it's the same as the internet, right? So at the beginning, not on all browsers were able to render all the web pages in the early internet. So basically, you will need to have a lot of consideration when you were designing web pages because it was a lot different from when you were using Firefox when you were using Google Chrome, for example. So that's something that step by step start to evolving and create some standard. And when there are some standard that all the metaverse are going to adapt, then it's going to be easier to have this interoperability. So there is still a lot of work to do there, and I think that there is still like some problems that need to be solved. And has been also some steps according to what are going to be the standards. So, for example, the 3D models are GLTF format, because that is kind of the standard for the metaverse. So there is certainly some steps that are going through the direction of interoperability between different metaverse, but I think that we are still in the early steps, and we will need to figure out some problems and some challenges that we have in order to obtain it.
Absolutely agree with what you said. It's going to take some time to get there, but yeah, definitely it is something that will happen. Okay, great. Before we wrap up, let's just see if we have maybe any additional questions from our guests here at our gorgeous Sky office. Let's just give them a couple of seconds.
Yeah, sure.
In case anyone has any questions. Any questions? Going once, going twice? Nope? Okay, so I think that's it for today then. Thank you so much for joining us, Adrian, and for sharing your invaluable insights into the challenges and intricacies of building an open source metaverse. It's been a very educational and enlightening conversation, I'd say. Also, a big thank you to everyone who tuned in today. Stay curious, keep exploring, and see you next week.
Thank you very much, Elena.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Sorry for the almost moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you were seeing what I'm sharing behind you, Adrian. Because that was on silent everywhere, but I didn't realize. I didn't think you can hear sound too. Yeah, remember in Meta, you could not hear sound.
And they were also some other